We're all curious and we want to know, who are you? Welcome to the platform where I talk about everything relevant, topics that resonate, and help you elevate. This is the platform. If you're a new viewer or an occasional viewer, please do subscribe. Your support goes a long way. Thank you. So in today's episode, we'll be looking at the concept of identity, the Imago Dei. So let's just start with the definition of terms. So what does the word identity mean? Identity is the placement of being, so what does it mean, to have a placement of being? What does it mean exactly? So to have a placement of being means something has been given to you, and you've constructed it as your nature, and that becomes your identity. So now the question is, who pours out this identity into you? Who places this being into you? So being can be placed into someone by like so many things. We're all a product of our environment. We're all a product of everything that we have experienced. We are governed by the law of experience sometimes. And that always like gives us a placement of identity. To a particular degree. For example, let's say you had a worst experience falling from a tree, right? Now as you've grown up, as you've seen life, in certain aspects and stuff like that, now you're gonna have a fear within you, that bounds you from like, climbing up on trees because your previous experience with the tree ruined all your other experiences that you'd want to have when it comes to like climbing trees. So now you're also governed by the law of experience that prevents you from like doing certain things. One of the things I've been careful about is managing the things that I have to experience, because if I experience so much, that could have a negative impact on me, you know, especially if it's a bad experience, so I'm always trying to like mitigate the number of negative experiences that I have to go through because I know that if I go through so many bad experiences, that is gonna limit me or that is gonna alter me in a way in terms of my identity, whereby I'm not gonna be able to fully want to do certain things because I've had a bad experience with them, and it's not always a good way to look at life because you always have to be willing to take on a challenge. You shouldn't always be governed by the law of experience. But that is just my case, with the law of experience because it also gives us a placement of identity. But if you experience so many good things, well, that's a good thing because you can continue to soldier on and keep on going with that trend. You're not really governed by fear if you have experienced good things because you have greater faith, if that makes sense. You have better faith, if that makes sense, for you to want to keep on going for what you want to go for because you haven't had so many terrible experiences in that department or in the area of your life. So the concept of identity has always been fascinating to me. Why? Because we are not really who we think we are, because there's always a dichotomy between who we think we are and who we present ourselves to be, and there's quite a fine line really. So which person are you? The person that you think you are or the person that you present yourself to be? Because the person who you present yourself to be, that is the type of person that people presume you to be, and now when it comes to like what other people think about you, they're going to think about you from the perspective that you present to them, not what you think you are. So now the question is, how then do you present yourself in a way that represents who you are in your thoughts? Right. Well, that's if you're having good thoughts, because if you're having terrible thoughts, then that's a bad thing. You don't want to present something like that to people, unless you genuinely don't care about the general public and modern decorum. So it's always very interesting when you think about the concept of identity, in many regards. And a few years ago, I don't want to use the word obsessed because there's always so much passion associated with it, but a few years ago, I was on a journey where I was like, okay, who am I really? Like, I wanted to discover myself, because at times you're having so many people telling you about who you are, but then you don't even know the person that they're telling you are. Some people be like, okay, you're the son of God and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, cool. That's great. I do not deny being the son of God, but I'm also like, okay, if I am indeed a child of God, if I'm indeed a son of God, I want to discover that for myself, not like someone telling me, because if someone tells me that I'm a son of God, well, they're putting a placement of being within me. Maybe I don't fully agree with their concept because, well, the knowledge is also limited to a particular degree, so you can always take that into account. But that's just a rant that I'm going through. Back to the concept, right? So I was on a journey of wanting to discover myself. I have this friend of mine that I always like speak to. So she always found it fascinating when I tell her that I ask myself these questions. Just to get an identification of self. So that I'm able to figure myself out. Because I do believe that a person who is able to figure themselves out, they're able to conquer themselves. And what do I mean by conquer themselves? Because we all have things that we go through. We all have fears. We all have passions. We all have triggers. We all have things we're anxious about. We all have things we're brilliant at, and by conquering yourself, you're able to conquer those things as well. That's if you're able to identify them, because what you cannot identify, you cannot solve. So it's always wiser to know who you really are, so that whatever you are terrible at, you're able to look it in the eye and really confront it and say that, you know what, I'm a terrible singer, but I want to become a better singer. So then how do I do that? Now you start taking steps, go through the process of becoming a better singer. You now have to, I don't know the whole process of being a better singer. I'm trying to think of an example, but I can think of one. But one of the things I don't know is at times before you start singing or anything like that, you have to drink some water, just to like smoothen your voice, etc., etc. Maybe that's one of the things that you have to do, so that you don't sound as terrible as you already sound, and the list goes on and on, so it's all about conquering the things that you don't like to face, and conquering the things that you want to see yourself becoming better at, so let's say you're a brilliant golfer, you know okay, I haven't played golf, so that won't be a brilliant example, but let's just say that you're not a terrible soccer player. You're a good soccer player, but now you want to improve your game. You want to become a better soccer player, right? So now the question is, how do you actually become a better soccer player? There are always steps that go with becoming a soccer player, a better soccer player. Maybe that means that you have to change your clits, you have to change the way you run, you have to change, a few things about yourself in terms of like how you find your agility, to make it better, how to find balance, improving stamina, etc. And the list goes on and on like that. So the concept of identity is always pointed out to you becoming a better version of yourself and you letting go of that version of yourself that isn't fully sufficient enough to be in this world, if you get what I mean, that is not able to participate in the way that you wanted to participate, that always makes things better for you, So there we have it. That's a start, So there are so many questions you can ask yourself when it comes to like wanting to improve yourself and finding yourself really as a person, as an individual, and one of, let me give you the set of questions that I ask myself, and on some I'll provide the responses that I would give to myself, and on some I just like pose it as a question, and maybe you can write it down. Maybe you can like pause this video or wherever you're listening from, if it's via audio as well, you can just pause it and then just like think about it, because it's really mind blowing, and it allows you to see yourself in a better light. So one of the questions I ask myself is, okay, I said that I wanted to be a better person, right? I wanted to be a better person, right? So and now I have to think, okay, if I do want to be a better person, well, that's a good thing, right? But what does better mean, right? What does better really mean for me? What does better mean? If I wanted to see a better Nigel, what does that Nigel look like? So better means improvement of being. So that's how I wrote it down. So that means that I'm supposed to improve myself for me to be better. That's what better means for me. So that means that I need a better placement of being than the one that I assumed that I have, the one that I had in my mind, because the person that I think I am, I'm sure that if I point myself to Jesus, and then if I point myself to me, without Jesus, there's always like a huge dichotomy, and I don't want to see who I am without Christ. So it's always wiser to just like, so it was always wiser for me to point to Jesus because he is the inspiration of who I want to become, because he's the archetype definition of good, so that's always how I always looked about it when I thought about, I want to be a better person. I want to be a better person by improving myself, not only by improving myself, but improving my being. And what does it mean when I say improving my being? Improving my being means that I get to look more like Jesus and less of me. There's this verse that says that he must increase and I must decrease. So that's what I meant when I say that, what? I want to become a better person. But what does a better person mean for me? A better person would mean an improvement of being, and an improvement of being would mean I get to look more like Jesus and less like me. That's what it means. All right. So the second question I had to ask myself is, what is it that I have to change to become better for me and for those people around me? So this question is like two parts, which is really excellent, really, because if you ask yourself, what is it that I have to change for me to become a better person for me? Well, that's a good thing because now it's like self-reflectory. You're posing yourself towards a standard that you can meet, a standard that you can set for yourself, and you say that, okay, this is it, and this is what I want to go for. And if I miss at this, then I'm okay with it. But I know that whatever I'm setting for myself is something that I can attain. No matter how low the bar is or how it seems to be to other people, this is for me personally before it goes into other people. The second half of the question says, for other people around me, you know, other people around you matter as well because you can only pour out to others what you're able to pour into yourself, you know. So when you're considering the people around you, you have to look at so many things. Okay, the people around you, okay, which people actually matter to you that you would want to change for, that you want to become better for? What is the relationship dynamic between, those parties, that you refer to as people? Because for you to relate with people, you have to be a good substance of being able to relate with people in a societal space. There are so many things that relate to like building a relationship with other people, really, such as common interests, etc., etc. So if you're going to improve yourself, if you're going to better yourself, and also to better yourself for those people that are around you, right? That means that you also have to be able to want to have a common ground that allows you to coexist with them. You have to be willing to come to a point of compromise so that you're able to coexist with other people, because in a societal norm, right, a normal functional societal norm, people will eventually start disagreeing at some point about something. So in that instance, well, either one person is going to submit or the other one is going to lead, or there's going to be an equal compromise. But well, that depends who you're dealing with, because not everyone wants to reach the point of a unified compromise. So it depends now with the people that you're dealing with. But it's always wiser to first reflect within yourself before you pour out to other people, because you cannot give to other people what you cannot give to yourself. You cannot pour out peace. You cannot say that you want to become a better, peaceful person when you yourself don't have peace within yourself. You understand what I'm trying to say? So it's always wiser to focus the energy within you before you get to pour it out to other people. I hope that makes sense. The other question I had to ask myself is, what is it that I do or want to do that gives my life meaning? That is a brilliant question. Now that I'm actually speaking out these questions, I'm also like asking myself these questions again. I've asked them before, but now it gives me another like point of view as well, because I'm actually thinking about them on a deeper level now, because this is like so many years ago. So now I'm just like, okay, cool, wow. That is quite the question. Let me actually repeat it for you. So the question is, what is it that I do or want to do that gives my life meaning? Right. So what is meaning? Meaning is the placement of value that you give to something, that is based on how you perceive it, right? That is meaning, right? So what can you do in your life that gives something value, right? Something value, something that you would yourself end up appreciating, you know. So for me personally, what gives my life value, I think when it comes to like giving life meaning or what gives your life meaning, you always have to associate it with a hierarchy, in terms of how you see things or how you perceive things, So for example, for me, I think at the foundation of everything, for me, it's always God, right? That is the value of everything, really. He is the substrate of my being, right? And then after that, there's family, right? And after that, there's friends, right? And after that, I think the general population of the world, really. But also, I think I do value my enemies, you know. Yeah, I do value my enemies, because the Bible says, um, love your enemies. Does it say love your enemies? It talks about something about loving your enemies, like that type of thing. But I'm always praying about my enemies sometimes, so that they come to like the full knowledge of God, because the reason why someone becomes your enemy is probably because of envy, misunderstandings, etc., etc., and those things have nothing to do with God. So I'm always praying about them from a point of love, in terms of like their transformation as well, but I do pray for my enemies, So I think that is my hierarchy of like how I perceive things, in terms of like what I want my life to have meaning about. Obviously, the other things like career, etc., etc., passions, hobbies, and stuff like that. I do not mention those things because they do not go into like the core foundations of like my being in terms of like what gives my life meaning. I could like, God forbid, but I could lose my job today, and obviously I'll be mad about it for a second. I'll be, upset, but I think I'll be okay because it's not the substructure of like my foundation, But let's say that you tell me that God does not exist, and then you're able to like fully prove it, and everything that points to God is mentioned to be a lie. Well, that will be like mind wrecking because that is the foundation of my being. So that means that if that is not true, that is going to question everything that I believe in. So you always have to be careful when you're placing your value when hierarchy, because whatever you put at your foundation, if it's shaken, then that means that you're also shaken because it's what you mostly believe in. So you always have to be careful when it comes to that. So whatever you place your value on as foundation, as core foundation number one, it has to be something that is eternal. And there's nothing eternal than God. If anyone wants to argue with it, well, feel free to argue because, well, I mean, God is amazing. Cool. Next question. So you have to ask yourself as well, what do you want? This is a good question because what you want is always different from what you need. Because you can do without what you want, but you cannot do without what you need. So that allows you to like place a value on the things that you go for and the things that you chase or the things that you want to find. So it's always wise to ask yourself, okay, what do I want? And not only what do you want, but how do you get what you want? Because knowing what you want and getting what you want and how to get what you want is a totally different things. So you have to know how to get what you want. You have to see. Let me tell you the way I view life. So life is basically like sales. If you're a good salesman, then you're able to get what you want. But if you suck at selling things, then that's a terrible thing. So life is all about marketing and sales. The more you're able to market the idea and sell it, well, the more people buy into it. So it's all about marketing and sales, marketing and sales, marketing and sales. So once you master the concept of marketing, once you master the concept of sales, that means that, whoa, you become brilliant because not only do you know what you want, but you know how to get what you want. And the concept of marketing and sales allows you to get what you want, or potentially if you're able to master it correctly. Right. The other question I ask myself is, what steps should I take in regards of getting what I want, because everything has a process. If you know how to get what you want, that means that you have to come up with a plan. You have to come up with a process in terms of how you would like to get what you want, you know. Cool. So you set up a master plan. You set up a way to go in terms of like, okay, Step number one for me to get what I want. For example, I always like giving romantic examples. I don't know why. I feel like they're easy to relate to. For example, let's say a guy wants to ask a girl out for a date. Okay, step number one, you have to present yourself to the girl. Obviously, she has to know your name at least. You don't want to be weird and just show face 1 second and then just say hi. You know what? I think you're my wife. That is just yeah, that is just cringe. So there's always a process to how you present yourself, because the principle of approach is also like a brilliant thing, which is something that I have had to like learn, you know, um, a few months ago when it comes to like the principle of approach, because at times you might have the right motive, but then the way you approach it is, it's not the best way to approach things, and well, that allows you to, not get what you want, So you always have to be careful when it comes to obeying the steps of the process in terms of you getting what you want. Okay, cool. Next. So the other question you have to ask yourself is, what do I love? So what is love? Love is the concept of ultimate sacrifice. And what do I mean by ultimate sacrifice? By ultimate sacrifice, I mean loving something to the point of death. And there's no ultimate sacrifice besides dying for something, dying for a cause that you believe in. You know, it's like when Jesus died for mankind, you know, out of his love for mankind, he decided to say, okay, this will be the ultimate sacrifice to demonstrate my ultimate love, so that I can give these people something that is eternal, a better life, a Zoe life, a life that represents God, a chance to redemption, a chance to be in the right standing always with the Lord Father. So that is the concept of love. So you have to ask yourself, what do I love? If you say that you love something, or if you love someone, and if it's not to the point of sacrifice, or the ultimate sacrifice, which is death, then I don't think I can call that fundamentally love. Why? Because, like I said, according to my definition, love is the ultimate point of sacrifice. Cool. So, other questions you have to ask yourself is, what is it that you want from other people, right? What do you require from other people? Like I said early on, you know, identity is the concept of being, and other people have an impact, an influence upon you, that they can pour their pieces of themselves into you as well, because we are also a summation of like the people that we hang around with, so if you don't require respect from other people, that means that your whole concept of identity is going to be partially flawed, because you are not summoning that which you require for you to be in the space of, you know being okay, such as respect, because we all want to be respected. We deserve some respect, on some fundamental level. So yeah, you have to ask yourself, what do you require from other people? Okay, why do you require these things? For example, let's say that you require kindness, you require respect, you require all these things. Why do you require those things? You require those things because you are also the type of person who is able to give those things to other people. You understand? Because human beings are reciprocal beings. We require the energy that we pour out, or sometimes, well, functionally, really. Yeah. So, yeah, you have to ask yourself, what do you require from other people? Another question you have to ask yourself is, what am I doing that I should stop doing? That's a good question. What are you doing that you should stop doing? Because I'm sure, since no one is perfect, we are all doing things every day, every second, every moment, things that we don't want to be doing, and we should stop doing those things. Why should we stop doing those things? We stop doing those things because they are not pointing at the highest good. And the question is, what is the highest good? The highest good is God. The highest good points to God. The highest good represents God. So when you're looking at the highest good, when you're waking up every morning and you're saying that, okay, Today I need to stop doing something, right? Well, maybe for example, maybe you struggle with cussing, right? And then you're like, okay, today I need to stop doing something. I need to stop cussing, right? So the question is, why do you want to stop cussing, right? You want to stop cussing because cussing does not point to the highest good. It does not point to God. It does not represent God. So that's why maybe you want to stop cussing. You want to stop cussing because it makes you feel bad. Well, feeling bad about something, well, that's a good thing that you feel bad about something. But if you want to stop everything that you feel bad about, well, that's a good thing because that is pointing to the highest good. But why do you want to stop that which makes you feel bad? Now you have to connect it to that which is eternal. So that is the only way that you stop. Because whatever is at your foundation, if it's not eternal, I don't think it's sustainable enough to give you the drive or the zeal power that allows you to like go through with that desire that you have. That is just my opinion. So the other question that you can ask yourself is, what are you ignorant about? That's a good thing to ask, because when you ask yourself what you're ignorant about, that means that now you're looking for room to have something into light. You're looking for light now. You want to get rid of your ignorance. That is why you're asking yourself that question as to like, what are you ignorant about? Because you want to become a better person, because whatever you're ignorant about clearly does not make you a good thing, or either for you or other people around you, because once you become less ignorant than you are, that's a good thing. That means that you are able to represent the higher version of yourself. And what is the higher version of yourself? The higher version of yourself is anything that represents God. And what is it that represents God? The deeds of Christ. Because he was also what do I call it? He was also the perfect model in which how we ought to represent ourselves as mankind. So the next questions, I'll just like browse them through, right? So the next question is, where am I incompetent, right? The next question after that is, what are my resentments? What areas am I good at that I should become better at? If I were to aim at something, what would it be? What could I possibly aim at that is higher than me? What are my gifts and talents that I possess? What do I want from a romantic partner? How can I become a better romantic partner? What am I doing that I should stop doing? Right. So I think I'll just touch into maybe two of these questions or three or four. One of the things I want to touch into is, if I were to aim at something, what would it be? Right. What would it be that I would aim at that is higher than me? Right. So as I was saying earlier on before, you aim at that which is at your foundation. You aim at that is eternal, because what is eternal gives you an identity that can sustain all periods of time, because that which is eternal, especially if it's God who is present in every moment of time, that means that you are able to sustain every moment that comes in your life, because you're connected to something or someone, a greater being that is higher than you, the one that is eternal, and omnipresent, and that's a good thing. All right. The other question is, what I want from a romantic partner. So that's a good question to ask, because if you know what you want from someone, that means that you also know what you require as a person, right? So why the question, why, what do I want from a romantic partner? It's because if you were to have a romantic partner, that person is going to be interacting with you probably most of the time. And whatever they identify themselves with, it can potentially end up identifying you as well. Because if they are pouring into you, right, and you're pouring into them, that's an exchange of ideologies, an exchange of mindsets. And you don't want to be exchanging a mindset with someone who has a poor track of thought. I hope that doesn't sound offensive in any way. I don't mean it to be in an offensive way. but whatever we're going to be conversating about, it has to be something that builds, you know, up to something that is eternal. And whatever it is pointing up to, it has to be glorifying that which is eternal. And that which is eternal is God. So in everything that we're doing, really, it must always be to the point of glorifying that which is at our foundation, and that should be God, and that should be to represent Christ. The other question is, how can I become better as a romantic partner? See, it's not fair for you to demand something from someone when you yourself you're not able to become the thing that you want or desire. For example, let's say you require your romantic partner to be kind, or you require your partner to be kind, or your friend to be kind, but you yourself you don't want to be kind. Well, that's not a fair thing to ask for, because you only want to be the one benefiting, but you don't want other people to benefit as well, because the reason why you require kindness from someone is the same reason why they need it as well. So kindness is literally a foundational base substrata to like everything that we need, as people. And we require from other people as well, because we know that we are also trying our best to be kind. So that's why we require kindness. So if you're requiring kindness, or if requiring a partner who cares for you, that's a good thing. But make sure that you're also that person for them, because at the end of the day, they'll end up being miserable and resent you, because you want them to be the ones playing the role of someone pointing at the highest good, but you want to be aiming at Hades. That doesn't work, because heaven and hell will never coexist. They will never be in a partnership. The spirit will always be against the flesh, and the flesh against the spirit. So that is basically the instance in this case as well, that the romantic partner who aims at the highest good will always be repellent to the one who doesn't aim at the highest good. Well, in the long run, because, well, in the short line of things, some people might not be able to fully discern, the detrimental effects to the choices that they make. But over time, they're able to actually see that, what I'm doing right now is not working. This person is not aiming at the highest good, and I want to aim at the highest good. The highest good means that I have to be kind, I have to be caring, I have to be thinking about the future, I have to be thinking about, generations that are to come after me. How do I make it better for those generations that are to come after me? It's like the concept of like kings, when kings are considering, a romantic partner to marry, they think about like the person that they're marrying, from what tribe, things like, recent family illnesses, like things that go down the bloodline, etc., things like that, because they want to be with a person that represents, the highest good, in some way or some sort, based on the ideology. So yes, this is the question that I had to ask myself, in terms of like trying to identify myself, as a person, to who I think I am and who I present myself to be, right? Because if you really look into yourself, if you really want to be brutally honest with yourself and ask yourself, who are you? If the version of who you are, if the version you see of who you are doesn't require grace, well, I mean, congratulations, because every time I would have closed my eyes, every time I do close my eyes and I think of myself, you know, apart from grace, I don't think I am someone that I would like to know. I don't think I'm someone I would like to look at, because it takes me to the place where I think about, every wicked idea in my head that doesn't point to the highest good. And it's not that everything is wicked, in thought. Everything is wicked when it doesn't point to the highest good. And like I said, the highest good is God. So everything that you think about that doesn't point to God, that means that it's wicked in a way. It possesses some carnality, and whatever version that is, that always requires grace, because, well, it takes a lot to be a human being, you know, and we do require grace, because we can never be perfect. Perfection is an unattainable standard that we could never meet. and that's why we do require grace. And we can only get that grace, from the eternal one, from God, from the giver of all things, from the one who loved everyone, since the beginning of time, even in their wickedness, is to possess that love and wanted to aim at the point of redemption so that he could identify, so that he could take them back to their identity. And what is their identity? Their identity was and is the Imago Dei. And what is the Imago Dei? The Imago Dei is the image of God, right? So there's so many concepts really before we get to the Imago Dei. There's so many concepts that try to possess or to claim a concept of identity when it comes to like human beings. So one of those concepts really goes with the Big Bang theory, right? We have the Charles Darwin theory that says that people at first were monkeys. That talks about the whole Zinjanthropus, you know, Homo sapiens, etc. I forgot the whole concept really, which doesn't make sense because it doesn't cover the whole concept before everything else came into being. So that's why I don't fully subscribe. Actually, not fully subscribe. I don't subscribe to that theory or another theory really that states, anything that doesn't point to God, in terms of how He is the one who created everything, right? So the Imago Dei. So what is the Imago Dei? The Imago Dei is the image of God, right? So that all points out the whole concept of identity. As much as we might have questions about who we are, what do we like, what do we love, what do we love or we love, it always comes down to the foundation of things. And the foundation of things is the Imago Dei. The Imago Dei is the image of God. And what is the image of God? We all know that God is tripartite, the Son, the Father, and the Holy Spirit. And that is the Imago Dei, right? So for you to be able to be in a place to understand fully the concept of the Imago Dei, the concept of identity, you need to understand the entities of the Son, the entities of the Father, and the entities of the Holy Spirit, as much as they are one person, with different functions, right? You need to understand that so that you have a better understanding of the Imago Dei in terms of when it states that you have the Imago Dei as well. Because when God was creating mankind, it must be in Genesis 1 verse 27, 28, if I'm not mistaken, that says that, in his image he created them, both men and women, right? So that is what we have as well. We have those entities, of the tripartite being within ourselves, right? Because we came from God, right? So if you do think about it, that you are the summation of God, think about that for a moment, that you are created in the image of God, in the image of a perfect being. If that doesn't change the way you think, if that doesn't change your line of thought in how you view things or how you view yourself, that means that potentially there needs to be a correction in terms of how you see God, or in terms of how you understand or value God, in terms of how you see Christ, in terms of how you understand the Holy Spirit. That's a wrap for episode 2. Thank you for watching and listening to the platform. New episodes every Thursday.